Okay, so I wanted to make a video showing you how to make a pot cozy using some methods I've seen online and just kind of adapted over the time to make sure that it works best for me at least. And so you can take that and then look at some other ones and see which design you like the best. Materials you'll need: you need some sort of scissors to cut. Sharpie's nice for measuring and for marking. A long 24-inch ruler is really handy. If you don't have it, you can get by with any kind of straight stick, but the ruler is pretty handy. Obviously you need your pot, and you need this Reflectix material, this insulation material with a foil backing on it. You can also use the window shade covers for cars, which is a thinner material, but doesn't give you quite as much insulation. Easier to find though. Okay, so first thing you do is you need to figure out the distance, the circumference around your pot, and there's a lot of ways to do that. One of the simplest ways is to just lay your Reflectix material out and start at one end and roll the pot along. But if you do that, you have to have some sort of marker to make sure you know where you're starting. So here's a little lip on this, and you can just start it right at the edge there and roll it along. And that's about the circumference of this pot. So I can mark that spot right there. However, what I have found almost every single time, there's something about the pressing it in or something that always seems to come up short for that distance. So I cut one before using that method, and if you measure it out, you can see it comes out right to that measurement, right what I thought it was going to be. But then when I went to wrap it around the pot, it was significantly too short. So you always want to go at least 1 inch over, because now this is basically waste material. I mean, I might be able to find another use for it, but there's a good chance I won't. And so always make sure you, whatever distance you come up with, just throw an extra inch on, maybe even 2, whatever you want to do, just to be sure about it. Because you can see that is definitely going to be too short. I have to go out at least to this line. And so I decided to go out to that line. Push it out a little bit further. So I cut the first one. There's going to be 2 of these that we make. I recut the first one, and it's longer for certain than the original mark, and I had cut it all the way out to here, and then I trimmed it down, which is always a good idea to cut it again quite a bit longer than what I expected, almost 2 inches longer. And you can see I even ended up cutting it a little bit longer than what my overage was. Mine's a bit gappy on it, so when I bring this together, there's definitely some room in there to wiggle through. But I like that because it makes it easier to get the pot in and out as you're trying to slide it in when it's hot. When you've got hot food in here, you really don't want it getting caught on these corners, on these sides, so it's nice to have it where it's a little bit roomy to get it in and out. So that's the length. That's how you figure out the length. To get the height, you have to decide what's your pot like, and how's that lid going to come over. And I oftentimes, if the lid does not nest inside of the rim, I will make a separate lid out of a tin pan, like a pie pan, and that way I don't have that lip that comes up over with my lid. So then you say, well, I want all the way from the bottom of this all the way to the top. And I did that. I measured that out, got it to be that height. But I also gave it just a little bit extra. I don't know if you can see that on the camera or not, but there's just, if I line it up on the top here, there's just a little bit of extra lip to it. And you can see how I measured the height, and then I thought about it, and I remembered when I put this together, I am going to put a circle of this Reflectix material inside this lip. And so that extra little bit will give that space and still allow my pot to fit all the way in without sticking out over the top. If it sticks out over the top a little bit, let's say I forgot to do that and it stuck up like this, that's really going to be fine. It's not going to be a big problem because you're going to have another lid that comes over the top of this to cover all that stuff up. So that's not the end of the world if you forget. To get that height, again, you just put it down, mark that distance. I usually use the ruler then and measure it. So I'm going to cut the second one of these. Once you have the first one cut, like this, then I'll show you how I cut the second one, which really is pretty straightforward. I know that this second one that's going to slip out over the top of this is going to be a little bit, just a little bit longer than this first one. It's not the same length because it has a greater circumference now that it has a slightly larger diameter. So you want to add, and again, I think it's at least an inch, inch and a half to be safe. So if I lay this out, you'll notice I have another line out here that's an inch longer, so I'm cutting it pretty close. I may even just cut it out a little, about an inch and a quarter or an inch and a half, just to get a little bit of extra length. So use the ruler, get my distance that I want, draw my line, and I also want it to be just a little bit taller than this one because again I'm going to have that little piece inside that's going to rest on top and I want it to come all the way to the bottom. So I want my second outside circle to be a little bit taller than this one. This one measures in at 4.5 inches tall. So that's actually, it's a little over 4 3/4, so I want to go all the way up to 5 inches for this new piece. Measure out 5 inches. So now I have the first one, and if I did this right, this should fit nicely over the second, and it's got a nice fit to it. So that looks like I did it just right. So you can see, even that inch and a half was just barely enough. You wouldn't want any less than that, inch and a half at least, to make sure it gets all the way around that second piece. And you don't want it too tight, because that makes it really hard to get these things on and off. Although the second one isn't near as bad as the first one. Okay, so I got my inner and outer walls, and I go ahead and just tape these up now. Put reflectix off to the side. And I measure a little over twice the length of this. So there's 1 and 2, and I just go a little heavy on that. Second one for the other piece, which is just going to be a little bit longer. And this has a backing to it. So I lay it down sticky side up, and I try to get it in there about halfway between the ends and about halfway across both, roughly. Does not need to be perfect. Stick that down, loop it over, make sure you're in there tight for that second piece. Stick that down, and then you fold these ends in, and that seals it in really well. I found having these pieces overlap on the inside makes a big difference when it comes to durability. If not, those ends tend to get wet or like steamed, and then they start to peel up over time. So it's really nice to have that overlap, and they stick really well in. Before you go any further, test your fit. Nice, easy, really easy for me to get that in there, no problem. That's that one. Second piece for the outer. Be really careful for that to happen, because this stuff likes to stick on itself. It still works out. You get a little bend inward. It tends to not want to roll as much, but I didn't do that before I put it out. Same idea. About halfway through on both sides and across. Fold it over. This one's a little bit messier, so I'm going to put that one down first. That one comes up. Got a little bend. You've got your outer piece, double check that fits. There you go. And you can see again how this has got a little bit of a lip to it so that I'll be able to set in another one of my pieces, which is what I do next. Make my tops and my bottoms now. That's the next thing I do. So the next thing I do is to make the lids. Or for this one, it's going to be the bottom. So we have, this is our inside piece, and we want it to fit in, the first piece we want to fit inside of this circle. So, take this off. And lay it down. We don't need this extra tag here, so I can just cut that off. So, now what I usually do is I just use this piece. I know it's the right size. I know I want to be inside of it. And so I'll just use it as my measure. And try to get it as roughly circular as possible. And I want this first piece to be on the inside. So I trace the line on the inside of the cozy, not the outside, but the inside, because I want it to fit inside for this first piece. We'll do a second piece that'll go on the outside. And you can see it's not perfectly round, so I then do my best to make it more circular. It's a lot easier if you just cut it out. Yeah, it's not perfect, but ooh, not perfect at all. Well, I may not work. I may have to recut that. That's getting pretty sloppy. So then I check it. That's actually pretty close, but there's this big wobbly piece out here. So you can just trim it. That's pretty close now. Sometimes it's easier to lay this down flat and then place this inside. See how it fits in there, and that's not too bad. It fits in there pretty good. You can see that. So it's just going to fit on the inside there. Then what I do, once I have that basically the right size, I cut a bunch of little strips, just little 1 to 2 inch pieces of this tape. 4. I'm going to put 4 on this. And this is just to hold it in place. Because what I found is when before I would make the outer piece and then I would just push this inside and it would fall out all the time in camp, and it just got annoying. So now I actually tape it in underneath the other lid. So now I've got that one secured in, and the pot will fit in like this. Even though I put this extra piece inside of the height of this, it still comes up, so it's perfectly flush up on top. Again, if yours comes out so it's sitting a little bit above, it's really not that big a deal. It's not going to cause a big issue, but I like it if it sits all the way, especially when I have this kind of lid. It's really nice and smooth, and it just fits right in there. It's all clean. So that's the first piece, the first circular piece. The second circular piece will go on top of this to seal up any of these gaps here. So any gaps that might be protruding or have air that could leak in and out. I could just foil tape this. Nope, I could totally foil tape this over all the way around and it would still do a really good job, but I found that that second layer, because this comes around and creates a second layer. So you have a double thickness wall here. Doing the same on the top and the bottom makes a really big difference for holding in that heat, especially since you tend to put this down on something cold, like a rock or something. So it's really nice to have at least on the bottom, but also on the top because heat rises, and so you want to make sure you have that in the second one. So we just do the same thing, same process. But this time, when I measure around the outside, I'm gonna when I do my circle, I'm gonna measure for the outside instead of for the inside, because I want it to come all the way up to the edge of this now. So now I have that one, and this fits over top. And that was actually a pretty good cut. Oftentimes it's got a little bit of extra because it's not perfectly round. That one turned out pretty good. When I tape this over, you don't need to get it perfect. When you tape it over, it'll totally just be fine. Be totally fine. Now this one takes a lot more tape. I still start with the same 4 pieces. So now, once I have the 4 on there, this is held in place, but I want to tape over every little edge on here. Not as much for holding in the heat, although that's certainly going to happen, but more to keep this from getting torn, ripped, melted, any of that kind of stuff, just to really close it up and make it rounder on the edges and keep it from getting as torn out. Because this whole thing will be in your pack, you'll be squishing it, and I like to have, I tried it once where I didn't do that, and these things really got torn up, and it didn't last as long. At least it looked pretty bad. It probably was going to wear out faster. So now I just have to cut the rest of these pieces. It's about 2 pieces per 2 strips per little corner here. It depends on how big your pot is. The wider the pot, the more you need. And there is the completed base. So now, the guy fits right inside of there, and it is ready to be used. This piece, our lid, it's going to fit over top, but we need to get the inside piece and the lid. So it's the same exact process we just went through for this piece. You're really just making 2 of these, one a little bit bigger than the other, but that's all there is to it. So I'm going to speed through this next part as well and show you, just kind of go through the process of making the second lid, but it's the same as we did for the first one.